911, do you need fire, police, or medical?
Young man beating up a woman across the street.
Austin Harrouff was always a straight-A student.
There's a girl laying on the ground. I ran over there. I'm bleeding profusely here at the moment.
Played football, was well-liked by everyone.
What kind of injuries do you have?
Oh, I've been stabbed in the back.
There was never any signs of his past that he had any disciplinary issues or mental health issues.
What really happened to Austin?
That's the whole troublesome part about this case.
I think Austin was a powder keg, ready to go boom.
Last night, around 9:30, a teenager turned monster marched up the driveway of this home and into the garage, destroying two lives, John Stevens and his wife, Michelle Mishkan.
Could have been unseen spirits.
Possibly a drug-induced psychosis.
It could have been mental health.
I don't need drugs.
He says, I don't do drugs.
It damages my health.
I would like to see Austin Harrouff be put to death.
Do you think that you will get the death penalty for this?
I don't know.
Well, folks, something different for the Two Guys, One Coup podcast. Today we are incredibly excited. Like, you don't even know, Cristie, how excited we are about this. To have Crisite Lee on the show. Let's tell you a little bit about Cristie and who she is. First of all, Cristie's a resident of Jupiter, Florida. We'll get into that in a little bit. She's an independent filmmaker. She has she's really the brainchild behind the independent crime docuseries called What Happened to Austin. We will get into those details, like in detail about that. But first, a little bit more about her. She back in 2015, I think it is, Cristie. I'm looking
around then.
Around then, because this is kind of what she does, which has helped her with her passion project, the docuseries. But she's been owner and operator of My Co Media Pro, a production company with a primary focus on high-end luxury marketing content. So we're talking about yachts and jets. So we assume a Two Guys, One Coup jet is probably in our near future, but we'll talk about that.
Maybe
and military helicopters too, guys.
And military Black Hawk and all that. Yeah, you're looking for the yacht.
Yeah.
Okay.
The planes are way more fun.
Yeah, planes are way more fun. Which eventually then led her to start developing reality television shows. In October of 2020, Cristie started creating the true crime docu-series we just talked about, What Happened to Austin. Since then, and a little bit more about how we met. We have a mutual friend named Sandra who introduced us, and I want to first thank her. Usually I forget to do that and do it at the end, rudely, but I truly want to thank Sandra for this introduction.
She's wonderful.
Absolutely wonderful. But how that kind of all happened was in 2020, she volunteered for the Trump movement by working alongside Carlos. I'm going to say his name wrong. Carlos Gavidia. Gavidia. Hey, it's pretty good for
you. Did great.
Filming, producing, and editing the Trump Tillas and events in Jupiter and Miami, Florida. Now, I'm sure those people remember it, but you're talking about. Was it the world record of boats with Trump flags? I don't remember, but it was.
I think we did break the world record.
I think so.
Or Carlos, I do not want to take credit. That Carlos Gavidia is the Trump boat guy. He was the brainchild behind all of that. But yes, I believe we did break the record. And those Trump Tillas, as we like to call them, like the flotillas, they were basically Trump parades on water. And
impressive, unreal,
awesome.
Unreal. But Joe Biden got 80 million votes. Anyways, moving on from that subject. Anyway, so she's been involved with that and fundraisers and events and Latinos for Trump. So much she's been involved in.
Huge patriot.
Huge patriot. huge proponent of the Second Amendment, which we will also get into. but again, Cristie, thank you so much. I know this is different for us, but it kind of all ties in together. The docuseries, what truly did, or what we speculate or think might happened to Austin. I want to start, if you don't mind, with kind of my memory of it. Okay. I remember hearing the story and I thought it was just absolutely bizarre. So the first thing that came to mind for me was, now this is a kid who killed a married couple, and we'll get into who they are and what that was all about. Walked right into their house, killed them, injured the neighbor, almost killed the neighbor, or could have. And then I remember hearing the story about him, like catching him, like eating the face of one of the murder victims. I believe it was the husband. I think it was John Stevens, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did I get that name right? And so my immediate thought was reverting back to another story I saw in Miami where there was a guy on the side of the road on bath salts, right? Literally cannibalizing his victim, who also lived, by the way. But it was absolutely, so that's the first thing that came to my mind. And I'm like, why, just what, like, drug induced had to be. I mean, this guy had to be on bath salts. He had to be on, you name it. I don't even know. Back then it was, we didn't hear much about fentanyl and all the other stuff. So that never came to mind. That's my memory of the case. And then also kind of following a little bit of the trial, my memory was, an insanity plea, that kind of thing. And then from there, I kind of just, okay, moving on to the next story, right? And on to the next thing. And I really didn't think much about it. And so when Sandra reached out to you, you reached out to us, you sent us the teaser, which our viewers just heard before you got on air. I was like, oh my God, like there is so much more. And this is so well done. I literally cannot wait for this to come out, which we hope is winter of this year. Am I correct?
Yes.
About that?
Yes.
So literally, Jim and I are like very, very crime documentary driven people. It's probably, we go politics, sports, crime. That's kind of our three things that we really are passionate about. So this was we were so excited to have you on here to talk about this. It's incredible. So that's what I remember from it. Jim, I don't know if you have any other memories from that story.
No, it's pretty much the same. It was
pretty much the same, right?
The only thing I can add is that from what I remember, is that he had a fight with his parents or something, got angry, and then that's when he went and did it. Again, these are just what you remember, what you hear about, and could be false, because we all know that, sometimes things don't come out correctly as it is. So, but yeah, pretty much everything. Yeah,
that's it. And to be fair, we didn't dig in to the story because
you told us not to.
There's so much that we because, well, first of all, you did, and I'm glad, because that's exactly how I want to pursue this, is what did happen to Austin, what happened to him, and what do you think happened? Now, if you want to start back in the whole Trump stuff and how you got involved with that, we can move into the docuseries. I'll leave it up to you, Cristie. The show is yours, and it's yours to tell this story. So however you want to begin. But again, thank you so much for coming on our show. It's an honor for us.
It's an honor for me to be here. I thank you guys very much. I am a little nervous. Normally I'm behind the camera, not in front of it. Not a huge fan. But I gotta say, I'm a huge fan of the show. Like you guys said, I am a patriot, and I love your guys' content. It's pretty entertaining. So I thought this will be the first time I've actually publicly spoken about my movie. And yeah, so, or docuseries, I should say. So I'm totally honored. So I really appreciate it. And thank you, Sandra. I love you. You're the best.
Happy birthday, by the way. As we're recording this, today's her birthday. So happy birthday.
Is it her birthday today?
Yep, it is today.
Oh, happy birthday, beautiful.
Yep. Yeah. So, well, thank you for the accolades there. That's very nice of you. So you talking publicly about this on our show first, that's that's even a bigger honor for us. So we thank you, honestly. And you're doing great. You look great in front of the camera.
Thank you.
Yeah,
keep it up. You know,
it's
Jim
just a
should be
personal
behind the
thing.
scenes.
People say all the time, why do you get worried about it? You look so great on camera. And I think we're all critical of ourselves.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
And
We're
like
our
I said,
own
I'm
worst
so
critics.
used to interviewing people. It's hard to be on the flip side.
Sure. Yep. You're right.
But I'll do my best to get through it today.
At least Dale
and you
doesn't
will.
help your self-esteem like he does mine. See, if most of the time people wonder, Jim, how do you come on the show anymore? It is what it is. So,
it is what it is. I mean, that's who we are. Jim, it works.
It does.
It just works this way.
So yeah, let's. Do you want to go ahead and just jump into the Austin, or do you need to lead into the Trumptilla before? Is that or how? Whatever.
No, I think we kind of already covered the Trump stuff. I just wanted to make sure your audience knew who they were dealing with.
Yeah, dang right.
Definitely a huge fan. So, but I guess it does in a way tie in to a little bit of who I am, because the whole reason I decided to create this series, which initially started out as a documentary, is because I'm a born and raised Jupiter Tequesta native. And when this story happened, even though it happened right down the road from where I live now, we were all just in complete shock. And Austin at the time was 19 years old, and my kids are just now reaching that age. But I had children that were also born and raised in Jupiter, just like Austin. And matter of fact, Austin, from all I could gather, pretty much hailed from the same type of childhood that my children and myself did. So I was just so taken aback, thinking, how can this happen? Especially because the word on the street was that he was a good kid. He got good grades.
Right.
He'd never been in trouble. So, it was quite baffling. I also my daughters actually, I heard about it on the news the night that the next morning after it happened. I was completely shocked. And then when my kids got home from school that day, they both said, "Hey Mom, we've met Austin." And immediately I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" And they're like, "Yeah, he was the nicest kid. He was so quiet, but he was super nice." And it turned out that their best friend had an older brother who wrestled with Austin. So they ran in the same, Austin had numerous types of friend groups. So he had his local friends, he had his sports friends, he had his college friends. So there was numerous groups, but he happened to be one of a friend that was part of one of those groups. And so when my kids told me that they had met him and that he was super nice, and my oldest said he even helped her with her homework at one point. They said he was so quiet and so nice. I just was baffled. And being a mother and being very inquisitive, I have a very inquisitive nature, and it being, we were all going through COVID at that time. I wasn't working. We were all just kind of twiddling our thumbs, waiting for everything to get back to normal. So I just started researching the case. And from there, right away, I thought, okay, this is a clear-cut case of mental illness that was left unchecked. Probably boomer parents, right, who didn't address their son's mental health, and poor Austin. And that was how it all started, was I thought, this poor kid. So as I started to investigate the case and get the evidence, I found myself changing opinions on everything pretty often. One minute I would think one thing, the next day it would be completely different. And so there was a real roller coaster of emotions as I went through and studied the case. Once I really got the evidence on the case, that's when things drastically started to change, because it was no longer opinion. It was more factual based. In the long run, I will say this: I cannot answer what happened to Austin. I think everyone's going to have to decide for themselves what they believe happened to Austin, because it's not that cut and dry. I wish it was that cut and dry.
Sure.
But it's not. And because this is a docuseries, I'm trying to remain objective, despite my personal opinion on the case and things that have happened in the case. In order to make a docuseries that is going to hopefully change lives and make a difference, I need to remain objective. And the whole goal of this series is to truly talk about three things, and that is mental health, substance abuse, and spirituality. And honestly, how they all three affect each other.
Yeah.
So it's a very complex case, and the answers aren't as easy, or it's not as simple as people think. So,
I would guess not. It wouldn't be.
In front of
Jim, you got something going?
Well, just quickly, from I am a fan of docuseries. I love it, and but the fact that you create one where you let the people decide, this is what happened, that is the best, right? Because how many times do you see the ones that slant the one way? It's whatever the producers, whatever the creators are, they want it to slant that way. The most notorious one right now is Making a Murder, right? They did Making a Murder, and they slant it towards, oh my God, this guy's innocent. Well, then it was debunked and everything else. So I appreciate that from that standpoint, because it's the better ones. Honestly, they're the better ones that say, okay, I don't think he did it. And then turn around. Oh, wow. Maybe this happened. Maybe, and so that's great. And I appreciate that. I really do.
So the
and that's why I'm not with.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. You go ahead. No, please.
That's why I haven't already. That's why I'm remaining independent at this time, because I found out early on when I was first pitching the idea. I found out early on that people are in mainstream media, so is mostly focused on the shock and awe.
Yep,
it's the shock value. They want to see blood. They want to see guts. They want to it and. That right away was never the intention of this series. And although initially I did it because it was in my hometown and it was such a wild case, it has really evolved into something so much more personal, to the point to where I believe the crime really is is just a backdrop to this film.
The true. Okay.
So of course we're going to get into the crime and unfortunately all of the sad, horrible, gory parts about it. Of course we have to, because it is the nature of the crime.
Correct.
Yep.
And people need to know how bad this case really was. But after doing so, we really plan on focusing on the three primary questions, and that is, was it mental health or mental illness? Was it drug abuse or substance abuse? Or was it even the possibility of demonic possession, which is where spirituality comes in?
Yeah, which is really a bizarre twist, because there's people that are like, that doesn't happen. We don't believe that.
Right.
Exorcisms, it's a Catholic thing. I mean, you name whatever you want to name on it. As far as the, was it drug induced? I mean, from all indication, and I don't, there's things that I don't know if you want to discuss or not discuss, because obviously you want people to see all the documents.
We don't want to go through the whole.
You don't want to rehash it all here, but there wasn't really. And when I say drugs found in the system, small amounts, right? Of marijuana.
So I will actually shock you. You remember how at the beginning you mentioned the Miami guy that was on bath salts, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Would you be shocked to know he did not have any bath salts in his system?
I would be. Yes.
Well, if you Google, you'll find out that he only had traces of marijuana in his system.
Okay.
They reported bath salts in the beginning, just like they did with Austin's case.
Yeah.
Both did not have any hard drugs in their system. They both had traces of marijuana, and also Austin did have traces of alcohol. However, I don't believe I'm. It's still up in the air whether or not I believe it's alcohol like you drink alcohol, like a beer. there's reason to believe it was something else that he drank within the garage of his victims.
Okay.
So that should leave you shocked right there.
It does.
Actually, yes.
Yes, because I don't remember ever hearing that it wasn't anything besides bath salts, which leads me to believe what is in the THC levels of this. You know what I'm saying? Like, so
I
that.
think it was pot. I'm gonna go ahead and defend.
Well, thank God.
My California sober and pothead friends. I don't think it's the weed, guys.
Thank God. Let's just be honest. Not for me personally, of course.
It
but
is
this,
odd that they both had traces of marijuana.
It is
but
weird.
This is Florida. You could walk down the street and get traces of marijuana. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
No, but that was one of the bigger shocks. But substances, again, I don't want to speculate, but based on the three questions that we're asking, there is a lot of evidence to point towards substance abuse. So I will say this. We're going to argue both sides of each coin, right? Allowing, almost as if the prosecution and the defense is arguing each point. Right. And again, for the sake of allowing people to make up their own mind, hence the question of a title, the victim's family, they are, I don't want to necessarily speak for them, but they make it quite public. They believe 100% that this was a crime caused by a withdrawal from heavy substance abuse.
Okay.
And based off of Austin's text messages, you would assume that if you read just his text messages alone for a year prior to the murders, that fateful night, which by the way was August 15th, 2016, you would get an impression pretty quickly that substances played a role. However, he was going through a period about a week prior to the murders where he did not. He claimed to friends and family that he was no longer doing any drugs and that he was quitting everything. He seemed to be having what I would call a spiritual awakening of sorts, whether that was substance induced or mental health induced, or God himself really was talking to Austin. I don't think we will ever know. But yes, there was a time that appeared that he wasn't on drugs, and that was right before the murders.
Wow.
Okay, so let me go then from the day. All right. So here's this child that, by all accounts, shocked everybody how he reacted. What was the trigger? I mean, can you tell us that? Can you tell us what triggered him to react the way he did?
Go there to that house.
And go to that house.
Time.
Right. So
I can speculate. So let me speculate. I first and foremost, I will say that Austin has spoken to no one about this case other than his therapist and a small stint on Dr. Phil, which we'll get into.
We will get into that
later. But basically, in August of 2016, Austin was a sophomore, he was just finishing up his freshman year at Florida State University. He had come home for the summer, and he was working with his father, Wade, who is a prominent dental surgeon, dentist here in Jupiter and throughout. And also going back and forth with his mother, Mina. They're divorced, who's also a local pharmacist here. He also has a sister named Haley, who lived at home at the time with his mom. So Austin came home for the summer, but pretty quickly, at least according to the family, they started noticing Austin acting different. He was, by all accounts, he was always a silly kid who seemed to always be wanting to joke around. And he was always always doing funny impressions, or sometimes they weren't so funny. Some of them seemed a little on the creepy side. To be
we all do that.
But he, from all accounts, that was who Austin was.
Right.
So this odd behavior, what may be odd to you and me, apparently was something that was pretty lifelong with Austin.
Okay.
However, because he was always a jokester, they said that he started to get really much more serious in those weeks leading up to the murders. Did you gentlemen have a chance to look at his YouTube account with the rap videos?
I did not look at that one. I looked at a bunch of video. I try not to get too, like I said, I didn't go too deep into it. You sent us a few, and I've reviewed those, but the rap ones I didn't.
Oh, I would strongly suggest putting some
Okay.
clips of that into this eventually.
I will.
It is wild. He actually mimics Donald Trump's campaign and talks about making trap music great again.
Okay.
He even does it looks like the Obama poster. And matter of fact, the night of the murders, he was wearing a "Make America Great Again" hat.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Surprised the liberal media didn't go crazy with that.
I am
actually
literally surprised about that.
They probably will now after this.
It's all right. Yeah.
So anyways, the family and friends started noticing that he was getting more serious. And based off of his text messages, you could see a pretty drastic change in his behavior. He went from a kid that was partying and focused on school, and always and his little rap career they say that he wanted to take it seriously. I wasn't sure if he really was doing that to take it serious or if it was just a passion thing like me. But he was pretty typical for a college kid. He was also in a fraternity. So, we all know how it is at Florida State and other
Florida State.
You drink, you party, you stay up all night, and then you jam out tests. I mean, he seemed like a normal kid doing pretty normal things. However, all of a sudden he became extremely serious, and he started talking about topics like religion, and very deep things about homeless and Black Lives Matter, and how he wanted he all of a sudden felt this need that he wanted to change the world, and he started believing that was his purpose. Again, some people might call that a spiritual awakening. Some people might say that's a side effect of substance abuse. Some might say that is merely the result of mental illness. But whatever it was, there was a change going on with Austin. His family is very close. Say what you want about Wade Harrouff, but that man loves his son. And his mother, Mina, a sweet, very sweet lady, loves her son. His sister loves her brother. They were a tight family. So when he started acting strange, they didn't take him to a mental health professional.
Sure, that was going to be a question. Okay.
Yeah, they did not. I know at the very end they had attempted to, I believe a day or so before the murders, and then it was just too late at that point. But what I feel they were doing was they were trying to keep him busy. They would take him out on bike rides. They would they were spending a lot of time with him. They made sure that somebody was with him at all times, and they were trying to keep him focused. So I don't know if they really did realize. I don't think anybody realized what was going on with Austin.
You can't probably. I mean, just little things like that. How can you possibly think this was going to happen? You
couldn't.
Right,
you absolutely couldn't think that. But I do have a quick question, if we can revert back to him in his first year at Florida State.
Yes.
Was there, and did you get an opportunity to speak to any professors or any of his friends that were or any of the frat brothers that were at Florida State? Was there any influence from any of them towards this more, what I would say, socially conscious, I want to help, I want to save the world kind of thing, I need to get involved? Was there any of that? And I say that for this reason, and I'm not trying to make it political, but we know how colleges are and the liberal things and how people can be influenced. Was there any of that at all, or was this more just so nothing? Okay. So it was just kind of out of the blue, out of nowhere.
This was out of the blue. This definitely was not something that was created from school. This was, again, trying to remain objective. But, it can appear to me, like I said, it was either mental health, it was drugs, or it was possession.
Spiritual.
It was some kind of spiritual awakening of sorts. It definitely was not something that the school pushed. So for the first time ever, I'll give accolades to the school, I suppose.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. And should. I mean, there shouldn't be. I'm not trying to go that angle. It just makes you wonder.
And that is a good point, because did he get, that is a very good point, because did something happen at the school that he got into a group of people that felt this way? Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Something did happen to that school, but it wasn't something from the school. I think frat culture had a lot to do with this case. And I will say the conversations that I've had with, Austin himself and the family, I can't really divulge much, but I will say that there has been, a couple of times now, there's been regret of joining the fraternity. I don't want to blame it on the fraternity at all, because the only person who should be blamed for this crime is Austin. There's no one else responsible for this crime, not his parents, not the frat brothers, not drugs, not anything. It's him. So he's responsible. But I did get a taste. I got the opinion that that frat culture was something that was less was definitely detrimental. And my daughter is currently at Florida State with her boyfriend. He's attending there. And from going up there and spending some time there, the consensus I get from questioning my kids' peers is that frat culture is very damaging on the mental health, especially when it comes to substances.
I was going to ask, was he bullied? Or was this a bully situation, or was this
not? I don't think so in college necessarily, but from early reports and just being, I'm an empathetic person. I tend to feel a lot. Immediately when I first heard of the story, I felt like this was a kid that was maybe bullied and was insecure. Just by watching some of his videos, it felt like he was the kid that was trying to get everybody to like him, because usually people that are awkward or insecure or bullied tend to use humor as a way to fit in. I did kind of get that vibe, but again, I don't want to speak on his behalf. But
is there any? So, boy, I don't know how long you have today, but it's going to be a while.
Plenty of time.
Yeah, it's going to be a while. Was there ever any diagnosis, whether it be a small case of it or a larger case of something like autism or Asperger's or anything like that with him? Was there any of that?
Prior to the murders, he had never seen a mental health professional. There was a report that supposedly he had, but I have not been able to find any evidence of a therapist or anything like that.
I say that because a lot of times that socially awkwardness is sometimes derived from those kind of, and that certainly is not here to say that every autistic or every child that's diagnosed with Asperger's has that kind of thing. But if you look at some of those YouTube videos, if you check out his channel, which is still up, by the way, if you look at those videos, you might feel like you're dealing with somebody that could possibly have been autistic or have Asperger's. But that very well could have also just been that he's a goofy kid, right? And he hasn't been, to date, he has not been diagnosed with anything of the sort. To date, all he's been diagnosed with is bipolar, droppy delusions, and schizoaffective disorder. There is no, and I'm sure he's probably dealt with some anxiety as well. Of course.
So it goes hand in hand. But there has been no official diagnosis of anything like that. But yes,
everybody
I liked your intake on the frat, because that's something I did not know. Right, I didn't, because we didn't know that. I didn't dig that much into it. But that is an interesting, because we all know you don't read Bible verses in frats, right? They like to drink, they party. That's what they're known for. So that's interesting that you bring that up, because maybe that's where, some of the substance abuse and like you talked about, maybe that's obviously what caused it. So, or
let
me
go.
rephrase that.
I probably
started that?
I probably interrupted Jim's question when he said, "What about that day or him going to that house?" Yeah, I don't know. So,
well, she was leading into it. She was starting out where it was.
I know, and I stopped her.
That's okay.
By
That's
going
okay.
on the other
It's a
directions.
very in-depth conversation, so we can bounce around. It's totally fine.
Well, you were leading in, which I thought was perfect because you were leading into, okay, we have to tell this backstory, right?
Yes.
To get to what happened, where we believe, right? Because the only one that knows is him, right? The only one that really knows.
Yeah, because the other people are deceased.
Yep.
John and Michelle are gone. Jeff Fisher is not speaking. So
we'll get
nobody's
into
going to know. Nobody's going to know it except for truly him and God. So it's all speculation. But so as he got home, and he started acting strange, like I said, the family was doing what they thought was the best thing to do, which was to keep him busy. Looking back on it now, to be honest with you, had somebody taken him to 45th Street Mental Health for a evaluation, I believe he would have been possibly, actually, I do believe he would have been held at least for 48 hours and then referred, because he definitely, the things that he was saying, especially the day of the murders, was just absolutely, he should have been dragged to a mental health place immediately.
Baker acted at least or something,
even
right?
if it was just a detox or an evaluation, something was going on with him. So unfortunately, that day, I believe that was finally the last day, the day of the murders. He was acting definitely much more aggressive and strange. That's when the parents finally said, okay, enough is enough. We've got to get him into a mental health professional. But unfortunately, by the time the doctors called back for the appointment, the murders had already taken place.
Jeez, wow.
So literally, we're talking about a day of a difference if they had done it the day before. But supposedly, it was just that day that he really started going off the rails. So that morning, he took off from his mom's house. He had left his car at his father's. They had gone to dinner. I think they had done a family dinner the night before. So he left on foot to go get his car, and he just started speaking very oddly, especially to his mother through text messages. I read things that just were very shocking. And then from the reports of the neighbors that had witnessed some an argument happen between him and his father, it seemed like he was becoming unhinged. He was claiming things like he was the Grim Reaper. That he could talk to animals. He showed up to a friend's house. It just showed up, and usually Austin was the kind of kid that would just walk into this kid's house. He didn't. This time he sat, knocked on the door, waited patiently at the door. When the kid came to the door, he just said, what's your sign, your birth sign? Like, Sagittarius, Gemini. And then he answered, and Austin turned around and walked away. And then, the friend was like, hey, let me go with you. Let's, let's all go to the beach. So the friends and the sister were doing their best to kind of keep Austin busy that day. So they took him to the beach. But he was already acting really strange. He thought he had superpowers. He was running a red light because he thought that no matter what, nothing could kill him. He was wearing a Michael Vick's jersey, of all things, saying that he could talk to animals, which was so odd. He had even put 2 wristwatches on his arm that day, which was not something that he typically would have done. And apparently what he was wearing was so hot. And think about, this is August in South Florida, guys. It's terribly hot. And, you're dripping with sweat just from the humidity. So, excuse me. So people found his dress to be odd. And then he was just acting very strange. He took off running from the group. And then, like I said, on their way home, again, he was acting strange in the car. And then I guess at this point, the father had gotten off of work and he said, you know what? Let's go on a walk in the nature preserve. So Austin, his sister, one of his good friends, or actually one of his best friends, and the father, all went for a walk on this nature trail. And during this nature trail, he was talking, kind of weird here and there. And then all of a sudden, Austin stops his dad, and he seemed absolutely frightened and was like, don't move, don't move. And it was the fact that Austin had could see 2 empty turtle shells. So the turtles weren't in the shells, they were just empty. So obviously they had been scavenged. And apparently he perceived those turtle shells to be a sign of danger and told his father that he was in danger. And he's like, why am I in danger? And he's like, because you're weak. And again, this is all very odd behavior.
Very odd.
Austin.
Yeah.
So what does Austin do? Starts taking off running. And the reports in the interview that Austin's parents did with the Martin County Sheriff's Office and the lead homicide detective, the father says that Austin took off running, and he took off fast, and he continued this pace for what the father believed was an unnatural amount of time. So things were getting increasingly weird. At this point, the father expressed that he knew Austin was thirsty, had to be dehydrated based off of all the running they were doing. Again, this is August. So they decided to go to Duffy's restaurant, which was down the road. So they got picked up by Wade's girlfriend at the time, and they all went together to the restaurant. They all sat down at the restaurant to have dinner. And I believe at this point, Austin was disconnected. I don't want to speculate, but from the way that the things that I've heard during these interviews, I believe the dad was a bit of a trigger for Austin. Just like my mother can be a trigger for me, right?
Of course.
Fathers can be triggers for sons.
Correct.
And if you are going through a spiritual awakening, or you're having a withdrawal from drugs, or you're having a mental health crisis, those things, your parents can trigger you pretty quick.
Sure can.
Right? So Austin's dad is appears to be a pretty normal guy, other than battling some depression himself. He didn't understand what was going on with his son, and I think more than anything, he wanted to snap him out of it. So I think that anybody going through one of those 3 scenarios was going to get triggered. So I believe that probably caused a little bit of tension that day. So when they sat down to have dinner, Austin excused himself to use the bathroom. He got up, and according to surveillance video, he actually left the restaurant, but then he turned around after a minute or 2 and did come back in and sat down. So he never went to the restroom. Austin did place an order. He did have, I believe, a glass of iced tea and was waiting on, I believe, some chili. And he excused himself again to go to the bathroom. But this time, he didn't go to the bathroom again. This time, he took off, and he took off running. He took off running all the way to his mother's house, which was a couple of miles away from the restaurant. So they realized that Austin's not come back from the bathroom. And next thing you know, the mom hears Austin come in, and he's got no shirt on. He's covered and drenched in sweat. And she was like, I thought you were at dinner. And he was like, no, I came home. And she's like, why don't you go and get changed? And I'll take you back. Because she asked him if he was hungry. And he said, yes. So he gets changed. And then I guess she was doing something in the kitchen. And oddly enough, he comes out, and all of a sudden she turns around, and he's putting Parmesan and Wesson cooking oil in a bowl and mixing it up and attempting to eat it. So his mom's like, are you hungry? Let me take you back to the restaurant. So that was odd. And on the way back to the restaurant, started talking to Austin, and supposedly at that time they were discussing getting him some mental health help. And from the reports, he was asking for mental health help at this point, that he was also frustrated with what was going on with him.
Yeah.
And she drops him off, assuming things will be fine. From the reports, he walks in, he sits down, an altercation takes place between him and his father, something where the father grabbed him by the shirt and said something like, what's wrong with you? Or, why are you acting crazy? Because he was scaring people at this point. And Austin drew back as if he was going to punch his father, but then immediately appeared horrified by his actions, put his arm down, and took off. The friend that was with them at dinner followed Austin out of the restaurant as Austin was on foot, and said, come on, Austin, come back in. Austin was like, I'm going home. I'm going to my dad's. Come with me.
Yeah.
Kid said, no, I'm staying here with the family. And Austin took off on foot. It was along that route, which was it was on the way to his father's. He was taking the route that was on the way to his father's.
Okay.
It was at this point, at some point, Austin started removing he lost his hat, and he removed his shorts. He had boxers on, but for whatever reason, he removed his shorts. And he was walking down the street. And according to his interview with Dr. Phil, this is when he started hearing voices. And apparently, he not only heard voices, but he saw something, a black figure. And this figure, according to Austin's own words to Dr. Phil, appeared to be somebody from his childhood, somebody that was bad by the name of Danny, not to be confused with some of his high school or college friends, but somebody that was bad news. And Austin became scared. And from what he says, he became frightened and he started running, and he ran towards a light looking for help. And what I believe that light was the open garage of John and Michelle. So we don't know exactly what transpired from the moment that Austin turned into that garage. There's been a lot of conflicting reports. Some say that John Stevens was out walking the dog while Michelle was attacked. Some say he was there in the kitchen prepping food. There is a lot of more, I guess, kind of guesses and assumptions, but no one really knows what transpired, except for the 911 call that was placed by the neighbor.
Right.
So what we do know for a fact from what the neighbor reported was at one point he was getting ready for bed. He heard some screaming going on. He looks out. He sees what he thinks is John and Michelle's daughter, Ivy, getting thrown to the ground. Because that's what he thought. He thought it was Ivy and her boyfriend having an altercation.
Sure.
So he goes over to the residence to try to break up whatever is happening. He was not armed. And Jeff Fisher is a large man. But I should also say that Austin Harrouff is a very large young man.
Is he? Okay.
He's very stocky. He was a wrestler. He was a football player. So the kid is built like a brick house. But Jeff Fisher is tall and big. So he towered over Austin. However, Austin was in he was in some kind of a state where he approached Austin. He thought it was Ivy, not Michelle. And he tried to break it up, and Austin said, you don't want any of this. And they got into a scuffle. He remembers being hit a few times, thinking it was just fists. And then he throws Austin to the ground and takes off. And as he takes off through the house to get away from Austin. And all of a sudden, he becomes weak. And he realizes, I'm bleeding. He realizes he's been stabbed. So by the grace of the good Lord, that man did not stay put, hiding on the side of the house, trying, bleeding out. He ran home and got to his home, and they called 911, and he had several massive
Wow.
lacerations from, we don't know if it was the knife. There was so many things at that crime scene that were used as weapons that we really don't know what it was that caused the injuries to Mr. Fisher. And he almost died himself. He had to be trauma hawked out of there. And I want to say, if Mr. Fisher ever sees this, I know he doesn't want the accolades, but that man is such a hero, because so many people these days do not care. They don't get themselves involved. Oh, I don't want to get involved. What a hero. He put his life on the line. He couldn't save John and Michelle, but who knows what else could have happened if he hadn't intervened. So my hat's off to Mr. Fisher, even though he doesn't want it. So then they call 911. The police show up. At first, it was just one officer. She was by herself. So Martin County is a very large county, and where they lived in Tequesta was actually considered Martin County. Literally, you can live on one side of the road and it's Palm Beach County, and the other side of the road is Martin. So most of Martin County, they were all on the opposite side of the county. So she rushes to the scene. That's deputies off to assist. And there is a dead zone in that area for whatever reason. There's a cell phone dead zone. There's a radio dead zone. Her partner, her backup partner, hears her call. He's all the way east. So he stops what he's doing, and he can hear that she's panicked. He hears what's going on. He flies to assist her. She's there alone. She said immediately she sees Austin on the ground. He has, which we now know is John Stevens, in a rear naked chokehold. And there's just blood everywhere. It was apparently a very bloody scene. She was telling him, had her gun drawn, and she was like, get off the victim, get off the victim. He wouldn't speak. He just refused. He kept attacking John. He was biting him in the cheek and like the ear area, the face. She deployed her taser numerous times. It did not do anything.
Wow.
He was unfazed by this. Her partner shows up, who actually was also training another police officer at the time, or sheriff, I should say. So now we've got 3 officers on the scene. They're kicking, they're doing the taser. Nothing is working. And I will say that Deputy Trocan, her deputy's ops backup officer, he is a mixed martial artist, and this guy is a big guy, and he's trained in striking and ground combat. And he was kicking this guy, Austin, in the head, stomping on him, trying to get him off of John, and it was not working. At this point, John did utter the words of, very calmly too, get him off, please help me get him off of me. Which I believe John was at the end of his life at this point to be that calm. And there was so much blood, I would imagine this was at the very end. And so then a canine officer from Tequesta, because Martin County, the canine officer was so far away. Tequesta heard it, Jupiter heard it. Everybody comes flying to try to help. So a canine officer showed up. They released that dog on Austin 2 times. And both times, Austin was able to get out of the dog's grip. He actually ripped his arm out of the dog's mouth. So the dog had a full grip on Austin's arm, and he was able to rip his arm out of the dog's mouth. Again, completely unfazed. And from all reports, they say it was like no one was home. He had black eyes. It was as if he was completely non-existent.
This was a complete psychotic break. I mean, this was literally a psychotic break.
Or possessed.
Well, we don't. But we don't know what caused it. Everything causes psychotic breaks, right? We just don't know what it was.
What made him?
Wow.
Something did it. Yeah. So finally, while the dog is attacking, Deputy Trocan finally did get a final good enough blow in the side of Austin's head that stunned Austin enough to where one of Austin's arms came up off of John Stevens, and
Yeah.
this was all they needed to be able to get in.
Just grab
They
him.
got a handcuff on one of his
Yep.
arms, and then they pulled him off of the victim and
Yeah.
carried him off. Unfortunately, John Stevens was pronounced dead on the scene. And then at that time, that's when they found John's wife, Michelle Mishkan, a small, fragile, very petite little thing. And when I tell you she was beaten to death, that is exactly what happened. She was stabbed, she was beaten, but I believe the official cause of death was she was actually beaten to death.
Wow.
So severe. I don't want to get into the graphic details. We will have to discuss it in the in the movie. But out of respect to the victims, that's as far as I can go. But as graphic as you could think the case it is. It was so traumatizing to everyone involved. And you know, that's really what started spawning this from being just a documentary about what happened that night into more of a focus on mental health and not just necessarily about Austin's mental health, but mental health in general.
Yeah.
I have interviewed, I mean, I think we're up to 23 interviews now for this movie. And when I tell you there is not one person who hasn't been gravely affected by this case, it's caused divorces. It's caused mental health problems. It's caused people that you would never in a million years would think that now they're scared to leave their own home. You know, and again, I don't want to blame it all on this case, but this case was so violent, and because they couldn't, you know, these victims were not saved, and there was no conviction of a trial in the end. He ended up we'll get into that.
We'll get into that. Yeah.
But because of the way things happened, I started realizing that mental health was playing a much bigger role in this story, because it just wasn't about Austin's mental health. It was about everyone's mental health and how traumatizing it is. And when I tell you, I am so disappointed in our not the Martin County Sheriff's Office, but in all of police and emergency medicine, how they handle mental health and these kinds of issues with their staff, our first responders who are our lifelines, how they handle the mental health in those industries. It is shameful. It needs to be revamped, and it's actually quite scary to me to realize that we put so much on our first responders and we care so little for their well-being, yet we expect them to be taking care of us in those
correct
days.
immediately.
How insane is that?
That's right. Jim knows this firsthand.
My son's a police officer, so
Yep.
So and I don't know if this is the same for your sons, but I've spoken to numerous police departments, a lot of sheriff's offices here in Florida, and there's a stigma attached to it that, you know, yes, there is mental health treatment that's offered, but if you accept that treatment, it's like a black mark against you. You're all of a sudden seen as weak. And it's a very, the culture is, you know, oh, you wanted to do this, you know, you've got to just compartmentalize and be strong. And I'm sorry, but the number one divorces are cops and firefighters. Okay. We also have a huge problem with domestic violence and mental health suicide. And it's with our first responders. Why is that? Well, I think it's because we're not addressing the truth. And that is that we're expecting them to deal with these horrible, traumatizing events that create lasting memories that are stored in your body. And we do nothing about it. And we say, man up.
When you have the MMA fighter, right, the mixed martial arts guy, and they can't get this kid off. The dog, he yanks it out, and there's no phasing. That has got to have I don't care how tough you think you are, that has to have an effect on you.
And then
it's
the crime scene alone,
what is wrong with this kid? Why?
Well,
You know,
and not only that, but right after too, guys. So not only do they see this horrible bloody crime scene, right? That was massive. But right after it, because the first police officer and the second police officer didn't shoot and kill Austin, they were called racist. They were said, oh, if he had been black, they would have shot him. These people were vilified in the news. It
Unbelievable.
was terrible.
Why does that not surprise me?
He knows what a rear naked chokehold is. Austin would have been on the back. The guy would have been on top of Austin. Unless they had come up and put a gun straight
to his head.
His head, which is an execution, which is not the job of a police officer to execute anyone.
Correct.
Unless they had done that, there was no saving John. They would have shot John. They would have killed him. So, and not only that, but there was already 2 people that died that night. To add another body to it, was that really going to change things? I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I will tell you my personal opinion on what I think could have changed the outcome. A gun. Had somebody in that neighborhood had a weapon for personal protection, that could have. So don't blame the cops. There should have been some firearms in my
if John or Michelle would have been carrying.
Or the neighbor.
Or the neighbor.
Yes, because that would have been the opportune time. Again, not to place blame on anybody.
Agree.
But I think if we want to talk about prevention, we should all, as responsible, American citizens, be responsible gun owners and have protection, because in that situation, lives could have been saved that day.
Could have been.
And it wouldn't have just been John and Michelle's lives saved.
Yeah.
So many people are losing their lives because of this case. It's much deeper than just John and Michelle.
See, that's something different. That's another wrinkle. That's just wow.
That's right. That's a wrinkle you don't think about, because when you I kind of want to go to now, if we can, a little bit, and why it's a wrinkle. Thank you for sharing all that, because there was so much unknown and what we wouldn't think about, and I'd say most people wouldn't think about, Cristie, is the mental aspect of those first responders and those who have to see that scene and try to live with it. It's just things we don't think about, right? We think about, the killer, put them away, kill them. We think about all the poor victims, but the victims are endless in a scene like this, because so many were involved in it, including his parents, Austin's parents. They're victims in this. The sister's a victim in this. His friends, his family, everybody. They're all victims in this.
This is the largest case of victims I've ever seen.
It's unbelievable.
His friend that followed him out, did he end up just going home, or did he follow him to that garage that he went into?
He didn't. He turned around and went back into the restaurant.
Okay. All right.
And my heart aches for that poor young man. Can you imagine the guilt he must put on himself?
Still today.
What could he have done?
And again, undeserved. That's been probably one of the things that has hurt me the most as being somebody who has so much empathy, is seeing how many people blame themselves for John and Michelle's murder. Rather than blaming Austin. It's insane.
It's the shoulda, woulda, coulda, right?
Tears.
Should have. That's
it's
right.
The shoulda, woulda, coulda.
And then there's all these Monday morning quarterbacks who said, "Oh, well, I would have done this and I would have done that." You don't know what you would do.
You
as
don't
a
know.
parent. You don't know what you would have done as a neighbor. You don't know what you would have done if you were John and Michelle. No one knows what they would have done.
Including those, Cristie, that vilified the police officers, the first responders. What would you do in that situation? I love people who do this all the time. It's like, you should have done this. You should have done. You could have prevented. You should have shot him. You should
put
have
on a badge and protect and serve.
put on a badge and do it then. Go do the dirty work.
That's right.
But they don't.
Yeah, and because I've come to be very, I've when you talk about these subjects with these people that have lived through it, it's not just like talking on a podcast. When you talk to these people that literally have trauma from it, I've gotten rather close and with some of them, and it just breaks my heart that they put so much blame on themselves rather than where the blame really needs to go. And that's Austin.
That's Austin. 100% Austin, regardless of the situation. Now, I want to get into a little bit, if I can, ask a question about after that day. So I'm sure there's a lot of anger about the outcome of what the trial was. But leading up to that,
there was no trial.
There was no trial.
I thought it was.
Okay, so the outcome of yes, correct. So that's kind of where I want to go with it. What is this? A lot of people, and I'm one of them. I'm skeptical when it comes to this insanity stuff and this pleading of it. You should be held responsible for the crime you commit. There's a punishment for that crime, regardless of the situation. Again, I'm not in that position. Austin wasn't my son. What would I do for my son? Right?
Yeah.
Anything and everything. Right.
Right.
So what led up to that? How did it get to the point where there was not a trial?
What's up, guys? I just want to let you know that I came to a realization of something. I no longer want to follow Arnold or any other bodybuilder. I want to follow myself, you know? I want to actually believe in myself. I want to learn from other things, other people, other bodybuilders and stuff. But I just know that they're not me, you know? I know what's right for me. I don't need drugs. I know that they can change me. But the thing is, that's not being healthy, you know? Being healthy is what's natural, you know? What comes natural to you? Do you think steroids are natural? Who knows, you know? Who knows? You think steroids would be beneficial? Who knows? But for me, I know that I don't know, but I think that steroids really aren't for me. Honestly. I used to think that I needed steroids to be a bodybuilder, to be this thing, to be this symbol, to be this lie, you know? All I need is really just to learn from everything. I'm learning from all the protein companies. I'm learning from all the bodybuilders, you know? I'm learning what did they do wrong. I'm learning where did they go wrong, you know? What do I think they did wrong? We're all the same, though. Peace out. Peace.